Hey, how's it going, everybody? This is Ryan here, and you are watching Some for All, a place where I make some My Hero Academia CCG videos for all of you amazing people around the world. I hope you guys are all having an amazing day, and if not, hopefully I can make it a little bit better. Today we are going to be going over the Izuku Midoriya demo deck cards. We're going to be doing a deck profile on it, talking a little bit more about Izuku Midoriya, what I think of him as a character card, and basically just talking about some example combos that you could do with this deck. If you haven't checked it out already, I made one for Katsuki Bakugo yesterday, so you can go ahead and check that out. And then once this video is uploaded and completed, I will be having a match between the two, between the Izuku Midoriya deck, the Izuku Midoriya demo deck, as well as the Katsuki Bakugo demo deck. It's very important for me to distinguish the two because, again, these are the demo decks. These are not the turbo decks. The turbo decks are coming out later this year, and once the turbo decks come out, I will be covering those as well. But without further ado, let's talk about Izuku Midoriya. So he is a you get to hold 6 cards in your hands when you use him at the start of your turn, and he's a 28 vitality character card unit. Now, each ability can obviously be used once for both of his enhances. His first enhance, name an attack zone. So whether it's a high, mid, or low, if your opponent's next attack this turn matches the name zone, it gets minus 10 damage. So game knowledge, match flow knowledge comes into effect here. You can basically make your opponent's attack nullified by having this enhance be played and be used during their enhancement step for their previous attack. Now, the only thing is that your opponent could potentially bait this out as well, which could be a downside because you can obviously only use it once per turn. So they might try to bait it out. So then their follow-up attack, the next attack that they play, is actually their true heavy hitter. So there is a little bit of skill that is involved in using this, but usually you can use this to deter a lot of really big hits from your opponent if you know what you're doing. The second enhance, which is really, really fun, is you discard your entire hand and your punch attack gets plus 10 damage. Now, all the attacks in this deck are punch attacks, so it's always going to be live. But more importantly, when you discard your hand, yeah, it is a little bit of a bad thing because you're not going to have blockers in your hand potentially for your next turn. Your Izuku Midoriya, will it be committed next turn? Depending on how your turn plays out, that's a question as well, but you're not going to have blockers if you discard your entire hand, which means that you are going to be defenseless next turn, allowing you to take a lot of damage. So it's kind of like a finisher, or it's a move where, like, if you know that your opponent's not going to really be able to react or hit you with lethal and you really want to get some damage on board, then you can do this. And there's a really interesting interaction with this and one of his other cards, which we'll get to a little bit later, but I honestly think that this effect is so fun. Okay, so let's go over the foundations. Bonds of Friendship. So again, Bonds of Friendship, it's similar to like the card in the Katsuki Bakugo demo deck, where the Fury attack gets minus 3 damage, whereas in the Katsuki Bakugo deck, there's one where the punch attack gets minus 3 speed. If anything, going forward, I feel like this would be more so of a side card when you know what type of deck you're facing. Just because not every deck is going to be having Fury attacks, not every deck is going to be having punch attacks, or vice versa, right? So it's just something to note, but this is just what's in the demo deck because you ideally are going to be facing the Katsuki Bakugo demo deck, in which that deck is only using Fury attacks, right? Up next, we got Passing the Torch. Really interesting card. So it's an enhance, and you have to commit it as a cost in order to use its effect. You either get to draw 1 card, so it's basically a 0, not really a plus, but it is a +1 if you have no cards in your hand. And since it's a foundation, you can do this every turn, and if you have multiple Passing the Torches, then you can resolve it multiple times, right? So on top of that, it is a mid blocker, which makes that really good because that means it can block mid, it can block high, it can block low, which is always decent if you do have it and you want to use it as a blocker. But more importantly, as a foundation, I think it's really good, and it has really good synergy with the Izuku Midoriya effect because you get to discard your entire hand to power up your punch to plus 10 damage. That's when you can use Passing the Torch to kind of reinvigorate your hand. You know what I mean? So, for example, you attack with a punch in your enhanced step, use your Izuku Midoriya effect, your Izuku Midoriya enhance, it gets plus 10 damage. It's your opponent's enhanced step. If they pass or if they enhance, whatever they decide to do, back on your turn, now you enhance by committing your Passing the Torch, and now you get to draw 2 cards. So at least that way, after you attack, if you do end your turn, at least you still have some cards in your hand, so you're not completely defenseless when you use your Izuku Midoriya Enhance. That way you still at least have some blockers, ideally some decent blockers in hand that you can use as well. So really good defensive card. Okay, up next, Rigorous Training is the next foundation. So this one is actually really good as well. Again, another decent defensive card. As a response, when this card enters your staging area, you gain 2 vitality. So essentially, as soon as you play as a form, as soon as you play it in your card pool and you end your turn and it goes into your staging area, you get +2 vitality. It's really good, just makes Izuku Midoriya a little bit more beefier. Again, more of a defensive card. Okay, up next we have Note Taking, the last foundation that we have in this deck. And this one's quite interesting. So your punch attack gets +3 in the enhanced step, but you have to flip it upside down as a cost, which means you can only basically use it once. Obviously, since it's still a foundation, you could still commit it if you need help in terms of passing your control checks or things like that, but you won't be able to repeatedly use the effect of this card because it would then be flipped over. But having that +3 speed is really nice, really good, especially when you combo it with your Izuku Midoriya Enhance effect that allows you to get +10 damage. Sometimes that +3 speed really pushes your attack over the edge, especially if your opponent has some progressive difficulty going on in terms of their defense. It's going to make them really hard to block that attack successfully. So even if they can't fully block it, if they partially block it, they're still going to take a ton of damage. At worst, they're taking at least 5 damage alone just from this enhance, right? So you could really make some really chunky plays with this. And of course, if you have multiple note takings and you want to save it up for an extreme lethal play, then there's potentially that as well. So now let's go over the attacks. So this is probably my favorite attack. Although you guys know I might be biased. You guys know I'm a Koski Bakugo fanboy. Out of all the cards in the demo deck, this is probably my favorite, Delaware Smash. So it's a flash attack, which essentially means that this skips your attack's enhance step. So you don't get to enhance the attack, but that also means your opponent doesn't get to activate any of their enhances as well. It goes straight into the block step. So they just have to decide to block the attack or not. And now it is a mid attack that can be blocked by anything, high, mid, or low. But when you look at it, it's a 4 speed. So they're typically going to have to look to at least control check a 6 if they want to stop it. And it's also a 6 damage card, which is actually pretty chunky, especially early on when you use this card. So they're typically going to want to block this, and then at least you're getting a card out of their hand. If they don't block it, then that's nice, and then you can get it into your momentum, which is always really good. Okay, so next up we got Midoriya Strike. Now, Midoriya Strike is an interesting card. I believe they name changed it to something else, but regardless, in the demo decks it's called Midoriya Strike. And essentially what this does is, during the enhancement step, your opponent commits 1 foundation for each punch attack you control. You use in your card pool. Now, the reason why this is good is because since this is also a punch, then of course, at worst, they have to commit 1 foundation. But if you have other attacks that you've used during the turn, then they could potentially have to commit 2, 3, who knows, right? Which is really good because the more foundations that they have committed, the less effects that they'll be able to use, because a committed card, especially if it has like a cost or something like that, they won't be able to use their effects, or they won't be able to use them in response to pass their control checks when you're getting to the block step. So it's really good for when you're trying to go for lethal. I feel like that's where this card really shines. It's a high attack, can only be blocked by a high or a mid. 4 damage, not the best damage, but like I said, this is more of a setup card than a card that you go for when you're trying to push for lethal. Up next, you got Velocity Hammer. Now, Velocity Hammer is another really good card and has really good synergy. And the reason for that is because it's a low, not only because it's a low, but because in its enhanced step, you can add 1 foundation from your staging area to your momentum. Now, this is actually really good because you're going to have cards like your note taking that essentially become useless once they're flipped over, right? Or for example, your rigorous training, where after it enters your staging area and it's +2 vitality, there's not much you can do for it other than committing it if you need to pass a control check, right? That's essentially the extent of its usefulness. But when you have Velocity Hammer now, you can now move that over into your momentum, which is really good because then it allows you to use your next card and probably the best card in the deck, which is a 5% Detroit Smash. Oh, so I guess the name, I'm not sure what they changed Midoriya Strike to. They changed it to something else, but the 5% Detroit Smash, guys, this card is absolutely nuts. So let's go ahead and break it down. So right off the bat, it's a 5-speed mid. So in a way, it's pretty balanced because it can be blocked by anything, right? Cool. I mean, if it wasn't a mid, it'd be even more scary. But in the enhanced step, you can discard 1 momentum, right? This attack will get +5 speed. So it will become a 10-speed mid. It's only playable when this attack's damage is 10 or greater, though. So how do we get its attack to be 10 or greater? Very straightforward. You use the Izuku Midoriya Enhance effect. By discarding your hand, your punch attacks get +10 damage, which means if you're able to trigger this Enhance effect, you now effectively have an attack that is 10 speed with 15 damage. If this goes through, for example, going up against a Katsuki Bakugo deck, you are doing half their life with this attack. Now, you do have to consider, since it is a mid attack, it can be partially blocked, if not full blocked by a mid blocker. If it's a high or a low, it will be partially blocked, meaning that your opponent will take half damage, rounded up, which is still a huge chunk, right? We have ways to get cards into our momentum, whether we're using our Delaware Smash and getting attacks to resolve at the end of our phase, we're putting that into momentum, or if we're using Velocity Hammer, turning cards like Rigorous Training, turning cards like Note Taking into momentum, and discarding them off for 5% Detroit Smash that way. Ideally, you want to use cards like Midoriya Strike to get your opponent to commit cards in their card pool, in their staging area as well. So that way it makes it harder for them to pass control checks on their end. So there's all those things that you add in together, and then you use a 5% Detroit Smash, and it's really hard for them to stop your onslaught of attacks. Now, imagine a situation where you use your 5% Detroit Smash and your opponent had to commit cards because you use Midoriya Strike. You know, your opponent's going to have less your opponent's going to have less available foundations for committing to pass control check, which means it's going to be a lot more difficult for them to fully block a 5% Detroit Smash, and they can take a ton of damage. So that is the deck, guys. It's really interesting, really cool combo deck. Definitely want to use 5% Detroit Smash as a finisher or to apply a lot of pressure, but I really like the deck because you just have that momentum chilling on the side, and then when the time is right, you just unleash that 5% Detroit Smash, try to go for lethal, try to put pressure on your opponent, make them take a ton of damage. You have some nice defensive tools in terms of disengaging, in terms of filling your hand back up for blocking. Of course, you have Bonds of Friendship, like I said, against the Bakugo deck. Honestly, I like Izuku Midoriya cards more, but Bakugo is still my favorite character. But honestly, like this package that he has right here is definitely good, and it's definitely interesting. But that being said, guys, there you have it. That is the Izuku Midoriya deck profile for the demo deck. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was informative. If it was, and if you guys like it, hit that like button, share it with a friend maybe, leave a comment down below and let me know. Honestly, that'll help me a lot. But ultimately, guys, please remember to go Plus Ultra, baby. You gotta go Plus Ultra. Stay tuned, because I will be having a match for the Izuku Midoriya demo deck versus the Katsuki Bakugo demo deck, and I will catch you guys on the next video. Have a good one, and I'm out.